Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra Amore and I'm here today with Robin Storey. Hi Robin,
Hi, Alexandra.
nice to see you.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're so welcome. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of background information about you. Robin Storey is an indie author of 3 books, How Not to Commit Murder, Perfect Sex, and an anthology of short stories called Comedy Shorts. She will publish her 4th book, romantic suspense novella An Affair with Danger, in early 2016, which is a departure from her usual style, as her first 3 books are comedies. She lives on the beautiful Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, where sitting on the beach and watching the waves roll in gives her inspiration for her stories and is the perfect way to procrastinate. And did you know we have a Sunshine Coast here in British Columbia too?
I do, yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I've been to that one. I haven't been to yours though.
Okay. Sometimes I've been Googling things for Sunshine Coast for here and I end up with Sunshine Coast over there. So,
The same thing has happened to me. That's so funny. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to come to your Sunshine Coast.
yeah, our Sunshine Coast is beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about how to get away with how not to commit murder. Sorry. I was intrigued because when I was doing a little bit of background on the book and the character, it made me think of Lawrence Block's Bernie Rodenbar series, where the main character is sort of a criminal, well, is a criminal, and the book is a bit comedic. So tell us about how not to commit murder.
Okay, I'll tell you the story first.
Sure.
Basically, it's about a career con man called Reuben Littlejohn who gets out of jail on parole and he decides he's going to go straight this time. But he runs into one of his old colleagues and is blackmailed into becoming an accomplice in a plot to kill his parole officer, Lucy, with whom he happens to be madly in lust. So his dilemma is that he has to pretend to um, be a part of this plot to kill her, at the same time trying to save her life, trying to prevent himself from being killed or going back to jail, and all of this without his wife finding out.
Oh, and he's married as well as all this.
Yes,
Oh, goodness.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So it was a lot of fun to write,
Mm-hmm.
and like one of the things that really attracted me to this story idea was the fact that the protagonist was a criminal. Because most crime and mystery stories are based around a amateur sleuth or a detective or a journalist trying to solve a mystery or a murder. And I thought this would be a real challenge to try and do a story where the criminal was the protagonist and also make someone who essentially rips people off for a living someone that the reader could empathise with. And yeah, I think I've succeeded because I've had a lot of readers say to me, I didn't want to like him, but I just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that attracted me to that particular story. And I did wonder when I started to write it how easy it would be for me to put myself in the mind of a 30-something, I think he's 31 or 32 in the book, 32-year-old male, which I'm obviously not and far from.
Yes.
And but once I started writing it, I found it was a lot easier than I thought.
Okay.
And when I'd finished the book, I gave it to my partner to read, and he's not a 32-year-old, but he can remember what it's like to be 32. Just from the point of view of authenticity, did I get it right? And for the most part, I did a couple of minor changes, so I was happy with that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you anticipated my next question, which was about writing from the male perspective. That's not something I've tried all that much. And then the follow-up question then is, what about writing from the point of view of a con man? Because I'm assuming you're not a con man either.
No. Well, I guess that was made easier for me because I was working as a probation and parole officer for many years, up until
Oh,
I retired last year to become a full-time author.
yeah.
So I, as you can imagine, met many characters over the years, um, heard about many different situations, and so that was actually how the idea germinated. And even though Reuben is not based on any one character that I've met, he's a combination of different sorts of characters, plus a hefty dose of imagination thrown in. So I guess that was easier for me to put myself in the shoes of a con man, having heard lots of different con men tell me their stories.
Yes, yeah. Oh, what an amazing sort of body of research you must have accumulated in that
Yes, I
job. Yeah.
have, definitely. It's been really good in that respect for ideas for the novels.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Um, and one of the I've used this quote with another author that I interviewed earlier that drama is easy and comedy is hard, but you seem to lean toward comedic novels. Do you find that's sort of your natural voice?
Yes, I do. I've always writing comedies comes easily to me, and I
Mm.
think it's just my worldview. I have a quite a quirky kind of absurdist sense of humour, and I grew up in a family where we were always trying to outdo each other with witty repartee.
Okay.
And I've read a lot of comedy over the years. I've written a lot of comedy because I think you do have to have a natural bent for it, I think, to be able to write it. But on the other hand, it's like any other genre. You can certainly hone your skills with lots of practice and lots of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've done over the years. I was a freelance writer for many years, along with being a probation and parole officer. And a lot of the articles that I wrote for newspapers and magazines were of a humorous quality. I had my own column in my local newspaper for quite a few years, and I could write about whatever I wanted, and that was usually of a humorous bent too. So I've really honed my skills over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you read a lot of comedic novels as well? You might have said that already.
I do. I
Yeah.
do read it. I've got a really broad range of books that I read. I've always read crime, right from when I was a teenager, and started off with Agatha Christie, read all of her several times.
Yeah.
Um, but I do read a lot of comedy, and I do find that reading comedy really helps me to write it, because even though I'm not mimicking those authors that I'm reading, it just helps me to find my own comedic voice. And somebody who really springs to mind, whose books I love, is American humorist David Sedaris,
Okay.
whose
Yeah.
books are just hilarious. I find them hilarious.
Yeah.
But in my genre, comedy crime, or humorous mystery as it's also called, there's a couple of writers whom I really enjoy. One of them is an Irish writer called Colin Bateman, who's written quite a few funny crime novels, and they are really quite funny.
Oh, okay.
So, laugh out loud, some of them. He's got a couple of different series with different characters. And another one is Christopher Brookmere. He's doing serious crime novels at the moment, but for many years he was also doing comedy crime, and he has a very good satirical aspect to his novels. And so I guess reading those, helps me to, hone my own skills and gives me inspiration for my own novels.
Yes, yeah. And they're not, I mean, comedic crime is not something you see on every corner. Like it's a little bit of a more rare bird, wouldn't you say?
It is, which is kind of good and bad.
Yeah.
It does mean there's not quite so many readers out there who are looking for comedy crime.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it does mean that it's a niche that you can really, really target.
Yeah.
People who like comedy crime, you may find your readers a little easier because you've got that niche group.
Market. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so is Lucy, the parole officer in the book, is she modeled on yourself then?
Well, she's young and gorgeous, so no.
So yes.
She's not really modelled on anybody specific, but
Okay.
I had a lot of fun writing that particular part of the book where he's on parole and he goes in to meet his parole officer and has to jump through all the hoops, because I know that system inside out and back to front.
Yeah.
And so I was able to really poke a lot of fun at some of the things that go on within that setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's probably not really based on anyone in particular.
No. And did you find that I always find it interesting if authors discover that a character does things that surprise them, or things the author didn't expect.
That's a good question, because I often read about authors who say that their characters are just taken over the book, and they've just got to kind of run along with them and follow where they go. I haven't really had that experience, I have to say.
No.
For the most part, I keep my characters firmly in check.
Okay, yes.
I am one of those people who likes to plot my novels, and so I like to have, not to the point where I have to know what's going on in each scene, but I do need to know where all the major events are happening and how it's going to end. So, generally speaking, my characters, I've usually worked out what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. Good. And I've never read an Australian crime novel, I have to confess. So is there a subgenre of that as well? Australian crime novels? There must be.
Oh, there's lots of Australian crime novels,
Yeah.
actually, and there's a lot of um, comedy crime, actually, coming from Australia at the moment.
Okay.
Especially by women and along the genre of Janet Ivanovic. I don't know if you've read any
Yes.
of hers.
Yeah.
I've read quite a few of hers with her Stephanie Plum novels.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few female authors in Australia at the moment coming out with similar sorts of novels where the female is the protagonist or a journalist or an amateur sleuth of some sort, and the novels are quite light-hearted. Having said that, then there are a lot of serious crime novelists in Australia too. I guess the most famous person that we can lay claim to is Michael Rowbotham, who's won, I think he won a major award, Golden Dagger or whatever it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what it's called.
Yeah.
He's written a lot of really, really good crime books. He's probably our best known crime writer. But funnily enough, he doesn't set his books in Australia.
Okay. Where are they set?
Usually in England or the United States.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And how big a role does setting play in your books? Speaking
The
of Australia.
setting, the setting does definitely play a role. I think it has to play a role in every book.
Mm-hmm.
The setting in How Not to Commit Murder takes place in Brisbane, which is our capital city of Queensland, and I live about 100 kilometres from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose it was because it's an Australian book, it had to take place somewhere. I thought, let's have it take place in Brisbane. There's not a lot of crime books written taking place in Brisbane, and that was another reason why I thought that would be something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think of, well, when I think of sort of gritty crime novels, I think of England and Scotland.
Yes.
But when I think of Australia, I think of sunshine and wide open spaces and all that kind of thing. And
yes.
Yeah, so gritty crime doesn't come to mind right away. But
it doesn't. Then again, if you're looking at places like Sydney and Melbourne,
mm-hmm.
There's some gritty crime that's come out of there. Melbourne in particular has a very kind of underbelly of crime there.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Corris has written, he's got a series of, he's a private detective, I can't think of the name, but he's written a series of novels that take place in Sydney, and some of those are really quite gritty. Mm. But yes, it's more, you do associate Australia with more the outback, and another crime novel, Gary Disher, has written a number of novels which sort of evoke that outback, sort of outback country town type of atmosphere.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And when the other thing I think of when I think of Australian novels are actually sort of historical novels and a bit like American westerns, but set in the outback in small towns a while ago. I don't know if that's a misconception or...
I haven't read any, to be honest.
No? Okay, yeah. I don't know why that comes to mind.
There are some novels set way back in the gold rush era, for example, convict era, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Which would be very interesting to read. I haven't actually read any.
Yeah, yeah. And you've decided to go ahead and do a series of How Not to mystery novels. So tell us a little bit about the next one that you're thinking about.
The next one, which I'm about to start writing, is going to be called How Not to Rob a Bank. And I haven't fully nutted out the details of the plot yet, but it's about two young women who hold up a bank. And, of course, things go wrong.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would be much of a story.
That's right.
And that's about as far as I've got. Well, it ends up in a kind of a hostage situation where they're holding hostages. And you might think, well, how can you get comedy out of that? But I will.
Yes, yeah. Oh, for sure. And set in Brisbane again?
Probably. Because How Not to Commit Murder was set in Brisbane, I'm thinking I may set this one in Brisbane as well.
Mm-hmm. And What's your writing practice like? You've mentioned that you do an outline and you know when the major plot points are going to happen. Anything else that goes into your writing practice?
No, I've read a really good book, Story Engineering by Larry Brooks,
Yes.
which has been very helpful to me in learning how to plot all the different parts of the story and where they all fit in, etc. So I try and do a bit of an outline according to his particular way of doing it.
Yeah.
I try to do character profiles, not really in depth, but I really like to know my characters and to be able to see them in my head, hear them speaking before I start writing, because I do find it difficult to do dialogue if I don't know the character very well. So I do need to have that. And one thing I have found very helpful is I will go on the internet and I'll find photos of people who look approximately the same as my characters. And I download those images and I put them in my research folder. I use Scrivener. And I have those images in front of me when I'm writing, and that helps me to orient myself with that particular character and what they might say or do. And same with settings. If I can find a photo of a particular setting that I'm writing about in the book, I'll have that in front of me as well, and it helps me to really get myself into the scene.
Yes, yeah. And how long do you find it takes to write a novel?
Well, a long time previously, because I was doing it while working. My job was only part-time, but even so, it used to take me quite some time to write a novel. I think it took me 3 years or something to write How Not to Commit Murder from Woe to Go.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it'll take me considerably less time now that I'm a full-time indie author.
Yeah.
So I've given myself 3 months to do the next one.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure how long it's going to be yet. So that's another thing I have to work out. So I think the important thing is to set yourself deadlines and stick to them. Otherwise, you just don't get anything done.
No. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to see if I had any other questions for you. I noticed that one of your reviewers said that your book, How Not to Commit Murder, blends just the right amount of comedy and crime. So I think that's high praise indeed when you're juggling those two.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is actually. And I have to say, for me, the comedy is as much an important element of the book as the crime. But of course, you have to have a decent story as well. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to read it. And good characters that people I feel that are real. That's another thing readers have said to me, and they said, "I really like your characters. They're really real characters, and I can empathise with them." So.
Mm-hmm. And you said you don't do too much character building when you're outlining your story, but obviously you must have a really strong feel for who the person is, if that's coming through in the writing.
Yes, definitely. As I said, I actually do a written character profile.
Yeah.
And look at all the various aspects of their characters, of the character, where they were born and what they like, and those sorts of things don't necessarily go into the book, but they just help you to flesh out your character.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm having difficulty writing a character, or they're not coming together, or I can't do the dialogue, then I know that I haven't thought that character through enough, and I have to go back to the drawing board and think about them a bit more.
Right. Yeah. And so the 2 girls who are going to be in the next one, How Not to Rob a Bank,
Yes.
have you started thinking about their characters yet, or is it too early
I have.
to say?
Yeah, I've started thinking, haven't written anything down yet because the idea's been kind of swirling around in the back of my mind for some time, actually. But both of them will have completely different motivations for why they're actually wanting to do this, which will be brought into the story as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Sounds fantastic.
It's one of those ideas I've had in my Brilliant Ideas folder, which I keep on my computer, and every time I have an idea for a story, even if it might just be a few words or a sentence, something I've heard on the news or whatever, I'll put it in that folder.
Yeah.
And then I can go in and look at that and expound on it. So.
Yes, yeah. It's so important to capture those ideas when they occur to you, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I do find that some writers don't like to talk about their books while they're writing them because they I don't know, that jinx them, or they don't want to be unnecessarily swayed by someone else's opinion. But I do find it useful to talk over my plot with my partner before I start, because he often comes up with good suggestions. Oh, why don't you make it that so-and-so happens? Or why don't you think, yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh,
Just
wow.
saves, it's good to have a sounding board. It just saves me from maybe writing half a book and then thinking, you know what, this is not really working. So.
Yes, yeah. So do you walk him through it in pieces, or do you lay it all out for him sort of in one go and see what he thinks?
I just lay it all out. If I've got an idea for a novel, I'll say, what about this? This is what I'm thinking will happen. And he'll come back and say, yeah, but you know what, I think it'd be better this way, or have this character in. And if I'm stumped and can't think of where I want the story to go, I'll often just use him as a sounding board, and he'll often come up with suggestions.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not a writer himself, but he's an avid reader, and
Okay.
I think that makes a big difference.
Yes, yeah.
To have, and he's one of my beta readers. I think it's really important to have beta readers go over your work for you when you're finished as well.
Yes, absolutely. And two heads are better than one. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Robin. Thank you so much for talking with me today. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your books?
Okay. My books are available on Amazon and Smashwords.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to come and have a look at my website, it's http:// storylines, storey-lines.com.
Mm-hmm.
I've also got my books listed on the website as well, with a bit of a blurb about what they're about, if people want to come over and have a look. If anyone's interested in signing up for my newsletter, you can get a copy of How Not to Commit Murder for free.
Oh, okay. Wow. Awesome. And I love it. I meant to say this right off the top, that your last name is Storey, Storey.
Yes, it's so appropriate, isn't it?
That's really your last name.
Well, it's actually the name from my second marriage, which ended in divorce.
Okay.
But I really thought to myself, I was going to go back to my maiden name, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to just keep this name. It's so much easier for a start. I'm essentially lazy when it comes to that sort of stuff. It's a real hassle changing your name. But also I thought, well, that's the perfect name for a writer. So if I take nothing else out of this marriage, I'll take the name. So
yes, yeah.
That's how I ended up with the name.
It's fantastic.
Very appropriate.
Very appropriate. I interviewed someone a few weeks ago, and she writes crime novels as well, and her last name is Blood.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so incredible interviewing the two of you with these amazing names.
Yes.
It was meant to be, obviously, that you were to be writers.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much, Robin. Take care.
Okay, thanks. It was fun. Thanks, Alexandra.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.